Hello everybody and welcome back to A Court of Words and Pages. My name is Natalie. So in today's video I'm going to be chatting through all the books I read in April. So I had an immensely successful reading month in April as I managed to read 16 books, which is the highest I have read any month this year by 5 books. So I think I am out of my reading slump that I've kind of been dabbling in these last few months, which is very exciting. I read a lot of really great books in April and I am very excited to chat with you all about them. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is one that I should have technically finished in March, but I did actually end up finishing it on April 1st, just after I filmed my March wrap-up. So what can you do? But that was 1984 by George Orwell, which was my classic that I was reading in March. I did let myself have an extra day because I started it like with 3 days left in the month, so I was like, okay, you know what? You started this because you decided this was something you really did want to read instead of what you were currently reading as a classic, so I will allow like 12 extra hours, which I managed to finish it in. So George Orwell's 1984 is a book that is set in 1984, but George Orwell wrote it much earlier, and it's in this society where basically you are being watched by the government. The government regulates everything. We follow our main character, Winston, who kind of lives in this society and works for the government and is like very aware that like he's being manipulated, everyone is being manipulated, and then it just like kind of shows him as he maybe starts to rebel. So this book's kind of split into 3 parts and I had different feelings about each part. The first part I really enjoyed. It was like weird being in Winston's head as he like understands what the government Big Brother is doing to manipulate them, the propaganda, the history they're erasing, as he is actively part of that. And just like interesting to be in his head while he's like doing this while completely being aware of it. The second part takes a bit of a different tone, a bit of a love story tone, and then part of the second part of the book is told in like, or it's transcripts from a book, which were just so repetitive. Like it'd say one thing and then it'd say it again in slightly different wording, and I was like, I feel like I've read the same thing 5 times over again. So I did not enjoy the second part. And then the third part I enjoyed again. It was really interesting and once again kind of fascinating and mind twisty, and I enjoyed the end of the book. I ended up giving 1984 4 stars because I really did enjoy it. So the next few books I'm going to talk about kind of all in tangent, and that's Wildfire, Sapphire Flames, Emerald Blaze, and Diamond Fire, all by Alana Andrews. So I read books 3, 3.5, 4, and 5 in this series, the Hidden Legacy series, so I am now officially caught up. So, what is the series about? So in the first half of this series, we're following Nevada Baylor, who is a prime magic user, which is the highest ranking of them, and she lives in a society where people have magic, and she gets recruited to hunt down Adam Pierce, who is a prime fire magic user. And in this, she has to work with Mad Rogan, who is a bit of a character. He's very infamous for his magic, and they end up having to work together to bring Adam down. And then, of course, there's a larger conspiracy. And so the first 3 books kind of focus on them, bringing down this conspiracy, and, of course, the romance between them. And then starting books 3.5, 4, 5, and then eventually book 6, which comes out, I think, next year, we're following Nevada's sister, Catalina, and she has to do some PI. Oh, Nevada's a PI. I don't think I mentioned that. And she has to go on her own adventures with PI work, and she's working very closely with Alessandro, and I forget his last name, who you kind of meet him in Wildfire. And then, so obviously book 3 is the last book in Nevada's trilogy, so that wrapped up, so I guess I'll kind of start there. I really enjoyed it. I liked seeing Nevada and Mad Rogan's relationship develop. I thought it was really cute and quite realistic. And then I really enjoy Catalina as a main protagonist, and of course I think she's really strong, and you kind of see how she's scared to let people in, which you find about in the series, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good series. I'm very excited for the finale to come out, and Alana Andrews is a husband-wife writing duo, and they know how to write a romance. Next up, I read Dark Fever by Karen Marie Moaning, which is the first book in a paranormal romance series. And in this book, we follow Mac, who is traveling to Dublin because her sister has been killed mysteriously, and the police there have dropped the case based on lack of evidence. But Mac knows there's more to her sister's death than people are letting on, so she travels there to investigate and gets caught up in the fairy world. She finds out she has the ability to see like beyond the fold and to actually see fairies. And there is a greater conspiracy abroad at foot, very similar, both paranormal kind of urban romances to the Hidden Legacy series. So I didn't like this one quite as much as I hoped I would. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I did enjoy it. I just wouldn't say I liked it. There's not a whole lot of romance in this first book, but I do expect it to pick up throughout the rest of the series. And it's definitely one I'm going to be continuing because I've heard that the first book isn't as good as it gets. So, I mean, I don't have a lot of thoughts about this one. I gave it like 3 stars and I will definitely be continuing. Next up, I read Even the Darkest Stars by Heather Fawcett, which is one that's kind of slipped out of my mind. So in this book, we follow Camson, who's always wanted to work as an explorer for the Empire. She knows she would be great at it if she only had a chance. And so then River, who is the Empire's greatest explorer, comes to her hometown, and everyone thinks he's going to hire Camson's sister to come with him on his next expedition, but instead he hires Camson, and she is very excited for this. Except for the night before they're supposed to leave, her sister Lucia sets off on her own journey to rival Camson's, and they have to follow River, and they have to climb the biggest mountains in this empire. Mixed feelings about this one. The middle of it is just a lot of the same. Climbing mountains, climbing mountains, climbing mountains, climbing mountains, which, you know, is like the point of this book, but it was just like so boring and so repetitive. And like this book just like left my brain. I remember barely nothing for it that like I don't even know if I could read the sequel even if I wanted to. I don't think I remember how this book ended. Yeah, that's Even the Darkest Stars. I gave it 3.5 stars, which is maybe a bit generous. It's maybe more like a 3, so that was that one. Then I read Sleeping Giants by Sylvia Neveau, which was just absolutely fabulous. So once again, I don't really remember the name characters, but they're names of the characters. But we follow our main first character as when she's really young, she was going around bike riding and she fell into a hole. When she was found to be laying in this giant metal hand. No one knew it was fun, and no one basically knows anything about it. So we fast forward like maybe 20 or so years, and she's been put on a research project that's looking into this mysterious metal thing because it's kind of assumed that it came from outer space. It wasn't left here by humans, and this book is told in kind of case file mixed media format along with other people on her teams as they discover what is up with this hand. Absolute new favorite. Like, I can't believe I haven't continued on with this. I listened to the audiobook while reading physically, and it was just this great experience as a full cast audiobook. Highly recommend it. And this book was just so smart. I never knew where it was going next. We travel so much in the space of one book, and it all just feels real. Like, it's fast-packed, but you can totally buy in. Like, there's time jumps and everything, and it's fabulous. I cannot recommend this book highly enough, and I'm so excited to read the sequel and figure out where this is gonna go. Next up, I read one that I actually do physically own. I seem to have misplaced it though, and that is Truthwitch, which is by Susan Dennard. So in this book, we follow Safi and Isolde, who are thread sisters. Safi is a truth witch, and that means she can kind of discern truth from lies, and her magic is highly sought after. So she keeps it a secret, and she and Isolde are on the run because a blood witch who can like smell people's blood and magic has discovered what Safi is, and so she's running. We're also following Prince Merrick, who's the prince of a neighboring kingdom who wants to take over in his kingdom. Like, the king rules the sea and the queen rules the land, but his sister wants to rule both. And it's all set on this backdrop of basically in this world, this 20-year truce that has kept everyone at peace is coming to an end. And of course, there's a greater plot that you kind of discover throughout the book and into book 2, which I actually have finished. But, yeah, that's kind of what we're following. And I liked this one. I gave it 4 stars, probably more like a 3.5 if I'm being completely honest, just because I was really confused through a lot of this book. This book just throws you right in there. Like, you don't know anything about the magic, the politics, the world, the characters, and it's just like bam, fast-pacedness from the beginning. So I think this book really could have used a slower start to help the reader get more oriented in the world, and like some of the magic stuff's a bit confusing still, but I did enjoy it. I love the characters. Merrick is absolutely fabulous, and there's some interesting things going on, and I'm very excited to finish reading the series, I guess, because I've finished book 2 by now, so I'm enjoying it. Next up, I reread a favorite book of mine, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Although I did discover upon rereading, I lowered my rating to a 4-star. It was originally 5-star. It's not that I don't enjoy this book, I just didn't love it as much. And I think that's also a me thing because I drew this experience out. I started by like reading it as an ebook, and then I switched over to the audiobook, which is absolutely amazing again. Full cast. So in this book we are following Daisy Jones, who is kind of a groupie in the 60s, 70s, and she wants to become a singer. And then we're also following the Six, who are this rock band. And Daisy Jones and the Six meet and become Daisy Jones and the Six, and they're following like the meeting, and then it's turned like an interview format kind of, and then as they become Daisy Jones and the Six, and then leading to their breakup, which they've never really talked about until this point. Taylor Jenkins Reid is an absolute master about writing these characters and making you feel like they are real. It's like you read this book and you're like, yeah, Daisy Jones and the Six, real people, right? And then, no, they're not. And you're just like, what? But no, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I just didn't have the same emotional connection I had with it the first time I read it, which is a bit of a shame. I'm about to reread The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, so I'm hoping that one still stays, because I think I like Evelyn Hugo more than I like Daisy Jones. I also think, you know, this book's kind of set in the 70s rock scene. I don't love that as much, like drugs, drinking. I don't love reading about that type of stuff, but Evelyn Hugo is like 50s, 60s glamorous Hollywood film star stuff, so I think I'm excited to reread that one. And then next up, I finished my reread of The Raven Cycle by reading The Raven King, which I don't know why I put that in as The Raven Cycle in my spreadsheet instead of The Raven King, which is by Maggie Steve Otter. And in this book, we follow Blue Sergeant, who is the only non-psychic in a family full of psychics, but she does have the power to, like, enhance other people's powers, and she gets caught up in the adventures of 4 boys who goes to a private school near her, Gansey, Adam, Noah, and Ronan, and they are looking for a dead Welsh king who will grant someone a favor once they wake him. And it's following their magical adventures trying to find this king. I absolutely love this series. It's one of my favorites. I've been talking about it for the last few months as I continue my reread, and I really need to get on with it and read Call Down the Hawk because Mr. Impossible comes out very soon. I think it may be sometime in May, so I really should get on with that. But I mean, this isn't the most satisfying ending. It's satisfying, but it's not like the best. I gave this book 4 stars, which is definitely the same as I gave it last time, because it's a bit convenient, but it's also like, it's convenient, but I love it, because like I don't want any main characters to like get hurt. But I love this book. Just the whimsy in it is absolutely amazing. We get a lot more of Henry in this book, which I love. And then the developments of all the relationships are just precious. So absolutely love this book. One of my all-time favorites. And then I read Wildfire, which is by Mary Lou, which is the sequel to Warcross. And in this series, we follow Amika, who is this hacker. She lives in New York City, and she accidentally hacks into the opening ceremonies of Warcross, which is this huge virtual game that like everyone plays. And then she's invited by Hideo, who is kind of the CEO of the company, to fake as a player on one of these teams and try to discover someone who is trying to bring down Warcross. And in the sequel, things have really changed. I enjoyed the sequel. I gave it 3.5 stars. I'd heard a lot of bad things, so my expectations were really low going into it, which I think helped me enjoy it more. It's certainly not perfect by any means, but we got to see some different sides of some characters that we hadn't gotten to see in the first book. It was all very fast-paced, it felt, but I did almost cry while I kind of listened to this and read along. I almost cried at one point, so it was good. It just wasn't great. It wasn't the best thing I've ever read, but I certainly did enjoy it. Finally, one that I've actually read and know where it is, and that is This Golden Flame, which is by Emily Victoria, and I also enjoyed this one. I think I gave this one, again, 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it for most of the book, and then I had very mixed things about the ending. So in this book, we follow Karis, who's she lives in this world where the Scriptorium holds a lot of power in her home country specifically, and they're trying to figure out how to wake up these ancient automatons that they don't have the power to use anymore. And Karis is kind of forced to work with them and try to do this, but she has this long goal of getting back to her brother, who she was separated from at a young age, and then she accidentally awakes Alex, who is an automaton, who was actually the son of the guy who did a lot of great stuff in this world and then did some bad stuff and was deemed a traitor. The two of them have to run away because they are being hunted by the Scriptorium. And I enjoyed this one. It was fast-paced, And part of this book is told kind of at a sea pirate setting, which I really enjoyed. I felt like some of the characters weren't developed as much as I would have liked to, and my main problem with this book, one of the characters did something very, very big and not exactly good towards the end of the book. And it wasn't like they just brushed past it, but it did feel like they kind of like skipped over it. We're just like, okay, yeah, let's continue on. I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like you should be holding this on longer. Like, do we really, like, it felt like something that was too easy to be forgiven from right away. And also, I mean, the ending is very convenient, very easy. I found it anticlimactic, so I don't know. I certainly would like to read more stuff by this author. I enjoyed this, and then I didn't enjoy the ending as much as I wanted to. After that, I read The Lady of the Rivers by Philippa Gregory, and this one we follow Jacquetta, who is the daughter of, I think she's a duchess. She lives in France, and at a young age, she has to marry the guy who is the English regent in France, and he like kind of introduces her to the world of like witchcraft, not alchemy, and like using powers that she's had because she is the descendant from a river goddess. And then her husband dies and she marries someone else, and they got involved in the royal court with Margaret of Anjou, and then the Cousins' War, the War of the Roses, whatever you want to say, whatever you call it. So I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars, I do believe, and I don't know, Jacquetta was a really interesting character to follow. I read this book because I watched The White Queen and The White Princess, which this is kind of like the prequel book to the books that the TV show is based off of. And Jacquetta changes a lot. I really did not enjoy her throughout the second half of The White Queen and pretty much all of The White Princess. She changes into a very power-hungry person. So it was interesting kind of seeing her grow up. I will say in my weekly reading blog where I read this, I talked about how I never felt like the stakes were very high. It's like, they don't necessarily need to be, but like, she has like husband and kids in these battles, and there's multiple times where she herself is in danger, and she's just like, yes, there's a battle going on. Oh, I do hope my dear husband makes it back. And I'm like, lady, your husband may be dead. Are you like not worried? So that just felt a bit weird. And then like the ending, I knew how it ends, so like it didn't like add too much. Like, I guess that's not the book's fault. That's like, but it's also not my fault for knowing how history happens. So, I don't know. I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it, and I will certainly be continuing on with the series. Next up, I read a book that was just absolutely fabulous, and that is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. So in this book, we follow Enchanted, who is an aspiring singer, and one day she meets Corey Fields, who is like the it person in the music industry, and he kind of takes her under his belt and is going to help Enchanted grow his music career. But then Corey isn't all that Enchanted thought, and now Corey is dead, and Enchanted has blood on her hands and can't remember the night before. So that's how the book starts, with her like waking up and finding out that Corey's dead, and then it backtracks and like goes up to that moment. This book is so hard to read just because we as a reader can see this and know where these situations are leading and know what's happening and how she's being manipulated. But like, you also understand how she doesn't see this. She doesn't want to see the manipulation, and then how she becomes stuck. And it's amazing. It's the way that the music industry specifically can manipulate black girls is a very important topic to be talked about, and Tiffany D. Jackson was absolutely amazing. This book is just absolutely fabulous. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's such an important book for everyone to read. Trigger warnings: sexual assault, kidnapping, rape, drug overdose. I think those are the main ones. They're listed in the front of the book, which I think was absolutely amazing. So if you are a bit worried about any of those, I'd say look into it a bit more before picking it up, because it was very disturbing to read. Another one that I do own is The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. So the Throne of Glass series, which this is a set of prequel novellas to, is absolutely one of my favorite series of all time. I absolutely adore it. And so I've decided to reread it this year, and so this is the first stop on that rereading train. And in this one, we follow Selena Sardothan, who is the kingdom's most feared assassin, and these are just 5 short stories that chronicle 5 different adventures of her leading up to the start of Throne of Glass. And it's just absolutely amazing. I gave this book 4 stars because I didn't love it as much as I did the first time. Some of the stories felt, I don't know, a bit rushed, and then Sam and Selena are precious, and I absolutely love them. I don't have much to say that I haven't already said about this book. I could gush about it for ages, but I'm not going to subject you all to that. And then the final book I managed to read in the month of April was my classic for April, and that is The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis, which is kind of the first book in the Narnia series. You can start with this, or you can start with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I started with this one because it's like listed as number 1 on the box set I have. But so in this book, we're following Polly and Diggory, who become friends one rainy summer in London, and then they get whisked away unintentionally and not by their choice to the magical land, and they discover Narnia, and it's an evil power that is trying to destroy Narnia and the foundation of Narnia, and it's absolutely fabulous. And I loved every second of reading this book. I gave it like 4 stars. I think I don't actually have it written down, but 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I'm very excited to continue reading the series. I read the audiobook and it was absolutely amazing. There's not a lot to this book. It's just very magical, and so yes, I really enjoyed it. So that was my speed wrap up. So I'm going to try to start making my wrap ups a bit quicker, because just if I'm reading 16 books a month, then they're going to get pretty long, and I don't know, just the thought of sitting here and talking about 16 books is in detail is not very appealing. So speed wrap-ups. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Down below you will find links to all the books I mentioned, as well as my Bookstagram and my Goodreads if you want to follow me there. And yes, I will see you again in a video very soon, and thank you so much for watching.